So as I just said in Danish, I'm going to give the presentation in English. My name is Daniel Joseph Barry from Napatech, and we're going to go walking through today some of the challenges that security teams are facing in trying to resolve security incidents quickly and to report on those instances very fast, now that we have GDPR on the way, and what kind of tools we have available to us to actually do that. So it should be about half an hour of your time, and as I said, we can ask questions in Danish afterwards, or if you're really burning, you can ask while we're presenting it also. So let's just jump straight into it. As I've called this, it's from circumstantial evidence to hard facts. So one of the central themes of this presentation is the fact that today a lot of the forensics that we do in order to try and find out what's happening or what has happened with a security breach is based a lot on circumstantial evidence. And if we're going to succeed in the future in trying to reduce the time it takes to find out if there has been a breach and then report on that breach, we need to do more. And we need to go from circumstantial evidence to try and find the hard facts of what happened as fast as possible. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So basically, the stakes are higher than ever. And the clock is ticking. Time is becoming an issue here at this point. So it's no longer in terms of whether you're going to get breached, but when. I think that's a very important point, because you'll have a lot of different vendors out here who are going to tell you that they can stop all the attacks, that they can, they can support all the breaches, and they can see all of the different worms and trojans out there. But the fact of the matter is, the hackers are they've got more resources, they're more inventive, and they will circumvent your defenses. So the question is, when are you going to get breached? And accept the fact that you will get breached. And once you've accepted that, then you begin to realize it's all about ensuring that you minimize the cost of the breach, and you do that by being fast. The longer it takes to detect a breach, the more it costs you, right? And if that wasn't motivation enough, with GDPR coming in this month, you also have the added regulatory fines that will come if you don't report in time. And I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about GDPR out there, but this is important, and this is what's actually driving a lot of people to look into these type of solutions. So as I said, relying on circumstantial evidence is no longer an option. We really have to get into some hard facts so the security team can find out quickly, is this a security breach or not? What kind of security breach is it? What's affected? And get reporting on that as quickly as possible to the people involved. The trouble is the security teams around the world are overwhelmed. There's simply too many incidents, and it's getting more complicated to actually find out what's going on. So this is just some statistics from the Ponemon Institute in McAfee for the last couple of years. It just gives you an idea of what they're facing. There's no question, if you look at the data here, that the number of breaches are on the rise. The number of malware variants is on the rise. So that just means there's more security incidents that a security team has to handle on a daily basis than ever before. Now the networks in which they're operating are also getting more complicated. It's not just a case of you have your own private data center somewhere where you have full control over what's going on in there. We see people now using software as a service, platforms as a service, Amazon cloud services. You also have hybrid clouds, private clouds. So there's a very complicated network that you're dealing with now as well. So that's an added complication for the security team. And the number of alerts that they have to handle is increasing, but it's at the same time increasing at a point in time where it's more difficult than ever to find people with the skills to be able to understand these different networks, understand these different environments, and also understand the security landscape. It's very hard to find these people. And then this is a very interesting thing. 93% of the surveyed organizations by McAfee in December 2016 felt that they were overwhelmed and couldn't triage all the different events that were happening in their network. That's staggering, 93%. So this is a cry for help from the security teams. Now, as I said before, it's no longer a question of if, but when you're going to get breached. And I just wanted to put up a couple of interesting things here. Not so easy to see on this screen, I can see. I should add that these will be available as PDFs afterwards, so you'll be able to download this. But on the left here is a site that I think is quite interesting. Informationisbeautiful.net, which is showing the world's biggest data breaches over time. And I can't give you a full flavor of it here, but it's actually more interactive, and it's moving and updated all the time. But if you just look at the timeline here from 2010 up to the present, basically, you can just see how the attacks have got bigger and they become more evasive. little difficult to see with the colors up here, but it is staggering what you can see here. And a lot of it is public information. But this is not new. Robert Mueller, who is famous for many reasons today, he also was famous in 2012 as the director of the FBI and bringing cybersecurity to the fore. He was actually one of the guys that really put cybersecurity on the map with the FBI. But one of his classic statements from that time was, "I'm convinced that there are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked." And actually, even for those, it's a question of who will be hacked again. And this has been proven out time and again. It's not just the case that these people have been hacked, but they also are repeatedly hacked. I mean, if you just notice it there, there's an ad-har attack there, two very big breaches that happened like almost right after each other. So, you know, even for the best will in the world and all the investment in systems, this is what's happening. So it's just a question of when. So what do you do then? You prepare for being attacked. Make sure you've got the remedial systems in place so that when you're attacked, you know what to do. So the breach notification period is actually the challenging part. This is where it costs money, right? Again, a bunch of statistics for you to peruse here. But if you look at it, there's two real time zones you have to look at. One is the breach to detection. So how long does it take to actually detect whether you've been breached or not? And then once you've found out you have been breached, how long does it take you to notify people involved, right? So if you look at it here, I mean, we've talked about the ops stack being overwhelmed. You know, 2/3 of them from this other report from Penniman Institute said that they didn't feel equipped to detect and inspect all these different incidents, right? So that's one issue. And because of that, you know, 57% of the data breaches that were detected are by people outside the company. So a lot of these big ones, I mean, you might have known this from Visa and all Visa cards, etc. Target was a good example, where it was someone outside the organization that said to them almost a half a year later, "I think your credit cards are being sold online." They didn't know, right? And half a year later, or in this case, you can see the average time is actually 191 days today. 191 days before you find out you've actually been breached, right? That's a long time. It's because these guys are overwhelmed. So once you have been breached, then it's about notifying people, right? And it has been shown time and again, the longer time it takes you to notify somebody, the costlier it gets. Now the average cost that's been worked out so far for a breach is $7.35 million, right? This is because people are stealing credit cards and information that they can sell online. The value of that, $7.35 million per breach, right? So that's a staggering number. That should be motivation enough. The time it takes today from detection to notification is 43 days. Now you think, okay, 43 days, is that good? Is it bad? Well, if you look at the different regulations out there, and I've chosen some from the US, right? HIPAA, which is for the health agencies, that's they have 60 days to report on a breach to people involved. Okay, so 43 days is okay in that regard. The finance domain with GLB, that requires 30 days. Okay, so now we're getting a bit tighter. But here in Europe, we're coming in with GDPR, and this is revolutionary because GDPR is saying to us, you've got 72 hours to inform people that their data has been breached. That is a game changer. I mean, 72 hours compared to these numbers here, I mean, we're already facing a serious problem there. Okay? Now, I've been talking a bit about the security team being overwhelmed, and you might ask yourself, why is it that the security team is overwhelmed? And what is it the reality that they're facing? This is a graph from January 2015. I'd love to see a newer version of this, but I just haven't been able to find one. But I think it's a fantastic graph because it puts you really in the seat of the security team, right? In this one here, they followed the security teams, and they found out that the average malware alerts that they have to look at on a weekly basis is 16,937. This is a typical organization, right? Of those, 3,218 of those were deemed reliable alerts, okay? So there's a lot of, for want of a better word, crap inside here that they have to just go through and find out it's a false positive, it's not really an alert, it's the machine doing something stupid. So 3,000 out of the 17,000 basically are things, okay, we need to do something about this. But of the 3,000, there was only 705 of them that were actually investigated. So that means it's hard to investigate things. It takes time. So the obvious conclusion here is, if you could investigate an alert quickly, and the quicker you can do it, the more you can do, the more you're on top of things. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Target breach that there was a couple of years ago. Target's a big chain of supermarkets or shops in the US, but they had a very famous breach and lost a lot of money. It cost a few C-level guys their jobs. But one of the striking things about that, when they looked at it afterwards, it wasn't that the systems failed. The alerts were there. They caught the actual problems. But they were so far down on the priority list and so buried and uncorrelated that they were just missed, or if they were seen, they were deemed as not important right now, right? So, now, do you fire the security team for that? No, you don't, right? Because they're hard to get, so you don't fire them. But obviously, if you could have a more automated response with correlation of information at a more automatic level, that would help you an awful lot, okay? Now, correlation of information, many of you thinking of security information and event management systems. You'll see a lot of vendors out here today, pitching those type of solutions. And they're actually a crucial part of bringing all this together, right? What a security information and event management system does, or a very good one does, is that it actually hooks up to all of the different security systems, gets all their events and logs in, but it also hooks up to the network equipment, right? And gets all the events and logs for the network equipment. And if it's a very good security information and event management system, if you want to know which one of those it is, you can talk to us. We can tell you which one it is. It also has full packet capture in there. So at various locations in the network, it's actually looking at all the data on the network. It's sniffing on the network and getting all the packet capture information and feeding it into the security event management system so it can actually look at the behavior of the network as well. So one thing is what you're getting from all the different machines. They can have good or bad granularity in the amount of information they're giving you. But if you really want the truth about what's happening, it's knowing about what's happening on the actual network itself and getting that information in. With that, you can start to do things like behavior analysis. You can start to build profiles of what normal network behavior looks like, and you can start to do anomaly detection and see what's going on. That's why CM is important, because it can correlate information from multiple sources and make some intelligent conclusions on, is this an issue or not, before it gets presented to the security team. But as you can see, there's new models coming on now, so we're evolving beyond security information and event management systems to what could be called security orchestration and analytics. And there's two models out there right now. There's the Gartner SOAR model, which is Security Operations, Analytics and Reporting Stack. And then the Enterprise Strategy Group has an alternative model called SOPA, called the Security Operations and Analytics Platform Architecture. But basically, they have some of the same elements in there. It's assuming that you've got your CM in place and you've got all of the prevention and detection systems in place that you need. But on top of that, you have things like threat intelligence, vulnerability assessment, incident response platforms, security automation and orchestration solutions, right? So there are some add-ons that you need to have inside in your network in order to make this work. It's well worth your while going in looking at this, because this is really sort of the ideal system that you should put together in order to make sure that you're fully on top of things. The underlying conceptual framework around this from Gartner, for example, that I've shown here, is the idea, again, that you can't rely on prevention solutions alone in order to do what you need. You have to also have detection solutions, some of that anomalous behavior detection I was talking about before. You also have to have solutions for responding quickly, right? Security incident response systems. And you also have to use that information then to be predictable. I mean, in the sense of, let's learn from what we've seen so far. Let's use analytics, let's use machine learning so that we can actually predict what's going to happen next time. So we can better alert that, hey, it looks like something's happening here, and we need to have a look at this, right? So you can get the priority in those things up. But central to all this is the idea that you have a continuous monitoring and analytics framework. So you're monitoring all the systems, you're monitoring the network as well, you're using packet capture, and you're making sure that you're continuously doing that, so you're staying on top of what's happening in the network. This is absolutely essential. Now, in many of the cases today, as I was saying, with some CM solutions and others, we're relying on logs, on sample flows to provide information to us. That is circumstantial evidence. It simply does not give you the detail that you need to do to say definitively, is this an issue or is it not an issue? Because you can't recreate what happened. If you really want to know what happened, you have to have the ability to recreate what happened. And to do that, you need the packet data. That's where the facts are. That's where you can recreate exactly what happened, and you know exactly what was going on at the time. So that is a very important and central part of it, not least of which is the security incident response, which is very important for GDPR. So if we're looking at GDPR here, I think just to put it in, you have lots of presentations about GDPR here today. And the previous speaker was very clear in the point he was saying, security people, we can't really do anything about GDPR. Well, not as such, not in the legal part of it, but certainly there are things you can do and certain solutions you can offer to help in that regard. But just to put it in context, if you do not notify people who are affected by a breach within 72 hours, you can face a fine of 20 million euro or 4% of your turnover or whatever's higher. So I know from Napatech, 20 million, I mean, then we're out of a job, right? It's not, we can close our doors. But, you know, I think we have to take that seriously. And it's just coming in now. And the key thing here is don't be the first one to get caught, right? Because we don't know how they're going to actually look at this. But, you know, you don't want to be the first one to actually pay the price for this. So it's very important in this science that you have fast response time. That is actually, if you have any goal right now, it's like, let's get our response time down as quick as possible. So if anything does happen, we really respond quickly to this. Let's make sure we know what's happening. Because the other thing is as well, if a breach becomes public, and you have to be public with it, your CEO is going to say, what happened, where did it happen, how did it happen, what's affected, who's affected. These are all details that you need to know. So this is what we're concentrating on. For that, we would say you need proactive incident response. It's not good enough to do manual forensics with log data or whatever, or even what we would call basic forensics right now, just relying on your CM system to kind of give all the information that you need. It won't, right? You need to do some proactive incident response yourself. Make sure you've got packet capture in there so you can get all the details and get to it quickly, that you retain that data. Because we saw that it takes maybe 191 days before you can see the breach. Now, hopefully, we're better than that, so you won't need to do that, but at least maybe 90 days of retention, so you can actually go back and see what exactly happened with that. That's a risk discussion you can have with yourself, how long you want to do that. And the key thing is have that packet data searchable, so you can get to it quickly and analyze it quickly. So that's setting the scene for everybody right now. I think, I hope that you've seen it's serious. You can't continue doing things the way you're doing it right now. You need some other ways of doing stuff. All right, so what are the kind of solutions that are out there? So just to introduce Napatech a little bit, we are not a cybersecurity company. We don't make cybersecurity software. We don't make systems. But what we do is we help the guys who do make the software and the systems to get their stuff to run faster, or to provide them more detail, or get their systems to work better. That's what we're here. And the kind of solutions we work with are what called reconfigurable computing solutions. Now, many of you may not be familiar with this term or maybe the technology involved, so just a little brief introduction to that. What a reconfigurable computing platform is, it's basically a standard server, an x86 server, with FPGA technology embedded inside of it. It's something that you're going to hear a lot more about over the next coming years. Intel, who's one of the biggest makers of CPU chips, a couple of years ago bought the second biggest FPGA chip vendor in the world, Altera, for $16.7 billion. So they're relying on FPGA technology now to keep their Moore's Law continuing. So you're going to see these kind of systems more and more coming in the future. What we do is we build what's called smart NICs. These are smart network interface cards, which are based on an FPGA that you can put into a standard server, and that provides you with a more powerful computing platform. Briefly, an FPGA, if you're not familiar with that, it's a field programmable gate array. It's a type of chip which is different to a CPU in the fact that it's an array of computational blocks and memory that you can connect together to do almost anything. The way you connect it is by a definition file which says this block is connected to that. That's called an FPGA image. It's software. So what it allows you to do is, by downloading this software file onto the chip, you can define what it does. And it's usually a process that can get executed, like an algorithm or some other pipeline that you want to execute. And it just does it very deterministically. It does it the same way every time, and you can scale it several times. So as a complement to ordinary CPUs, which is kind of jack of all trades, does lots of different things. The FPGA is for taking one task, one process, and scaling that to a very high level and doing it at very high speeds. So that's where they're very complementary technologies. So these platforms are quite powerful. And what we're using it to do in Napatech in the cybersecurity context is to look at, we help guys who build security appliances to get their data path to run faster. So get them to run at 10, 25, even 100 gigabits per second, right? We do some computer hardware offload, so you can actually offload instead of running things in the CPU, you can run them on the FPGA. So things like encryption, decryption, compression, some of these really intensive workloads, they run extremely well on an FPGA, and we've got things like 40 times in performance improvement by doing it onto those things. Virtual networks, we were involved there as well. By putting these into data centers, virtual networks, we can actually see what's going on between virtual machines. So you have actually, if you've got virtual instances, you can actually see what's going on between those virtual instances within the same machine, which has been a black spot up to now. It's a little bit divergent from our discussion today, but for virtual security, there are certainly solutions there. But really what's important for us today is this discussion about detailed forensic analysis. We've done a lot of work in that area. So the kind of solutions that we've been looking at here in this detailed forensic analysis place, and this is just some examples of the other things that we do. We've done some Splunk integration. Splunk is a very common SCM that's out there. So we've done integrations into that, so you can actually get access to captured data quickly. We've done Palo Alto forensics as well, which I'm going to show you examples of that in a minute for both of those solutions, where you can actually quickly get to the details of what's happening in the network through these two solutions. Data retention for detailed investigation or for behavior analysis is actually part of what we do. And for that, we use a product called Pandion, which I'm just going to talk to you about for a moment. It's all about capturing that packet data. So our Pandion is basically a software product, but it runs on the SmartNIC FPGA-based SmartNICs that we have that are part of this reconfigurable computing platform. And what this is doing is basically the card is sniffing on the network, it's capturing all the data, it's making sure that none of the data is being lost, and it's doing it at speeds up to 40 gigabits per second, and then it's writing it to disk in the same server at 40 gigabits per second, and it's not losing any of the data, right? And this is at any theoretical speed that you like. There's no caveats here. It'll write 40 gigabits per second of data to the disk. Now that's great. Now you've got this retention of all the network data. But what's really cool about it is you can read from that disk at a very fast rate as well. I think it's between 5 and 10 gigabits per second right now. You can actually retrieve that data from disk using a REST API. So what this is basically a repository of all the things that are going on in the network that you can get to very easily through a REST API from anywhere within your network. And you can have multiple of these boxes in the network, send that search out to all the other boxes, so whatever you're looking for, it can actually extract from anywhere, any of the boxes in the network, and provide back one answer. So you don't have to actually go to each box and try and put that together yourself. So it's quite smart in that regard. And you can start small. You don't have to start at 40 gigabits per second. You can start at lower speeds. You can start with a very small installation, a 72 terabyte hard disk retention, but you can also scale up to, I think, 10 petabytes, if that's what you want to do. So it's quite scalable. So you can decide for yourself how much retention you want and where you want it in your network. So how does this actually get used in reality? So what you do is you basically take that server. You can have an existing server, an x86 server that you have in your data center. You get one of our SmartNIC FPGA cards, put that in there. You can just take the standard Intel card out and put this one in. It'll work just fine. You have a tap on the network, and that will give you all the data that you need to feed the system. The network recorder software then will take all the captured packets, I should say, and actually writes them to disk in real time. And then you can actually get access to that data, and it's 100% of your network data. So everything gets captured, right? So how do you use this in a use case? So I'm just going to show you a couple of use cases here, which just to round out. So the first use case is a threat analytics use case. So here's a combination of two partners we're working with. One is Roda and Schwartz Cybersecurity, and the other is Splunk. So in this, what you're looking at here is a network. There's a tap in the network, which is feeding this net sensor product from Rohde & Schwarz, where they're capturing data and doing analysis on it in real time. The other is going to our Pandion recorder box. So that one there is just writing all this data to disk. What the net sensor is providing is metadata, it's providing cybersecurity alarms, and it's providing statistics. That's feeding into the CM system, which in this case is based on Splunk. So what's really cool here is that's giving you all of that circumstantial evidence, right? I'm looking at metadata, I'm looking at alerts, I'm looking at logs, statistics, but now I've found something. And I'm in a security team, and I need to find out quickly what's happened here. So what we've done is we built in a link into Splunk, so you just have to click on a link, and it goes down and retrieves the packets that are associated with that particular event. And then from that, you can start to analyze, okay, what exactly happened here, right? Something similar to that is what we've done with Palo Alto. So many of you are familiar with Palo Alto firewalls, and many of you may have worked with them. So some of these screens you might recognize. But basically what we've done here, and we've actually worked together with Credocom on this particular solution for some of their customers, is basically in that log event view that you have in the firewall, which is this one here, that can give you a lot of details about what's happening with this event, right? What you can do though is you can actually add a log link into that view. And that's what we've done. We've put a log link in there. That log link is calling the REST API of the Pandion, which is capturing all the data. And then it actually extracts all that data that you need for that particular event. So just to walk you through how that actually works. And I should say as well, before I move on to the other slides, these different steps I'm going to walk through now is how you would do it using the Palo Alto and the log link and Wireshark. But Credocom actually have a product called Pinpoint, which automates this entire process. So you just have to click a button and it'll do all this for you. So if you're interested in that, you should go over to their stand and talk to them about it. But the steps you go through here is, number one, you take a look at the actual raw data here. And what you'll see here is that there's log links in here. So this is something that you guys as an administrator can put in yourself, so you can get to more information. So there's a log link in here, which you can click, and that will give you the raw PCAP file, as it's called. It's a packet capture file. It's a standard format, an open format, for how to get packet information off the net. Many of you probably know that already. But you just click on that, and what happens then is that this will open up the Pandion GUI, and it will actually fill out all the fields that you need to fill out for that. So you can actually do a search. This is a Berkeley packet filter type of approach. So it actually will feed all the information that you need in order to extract the information related to that event. And the information you extract will come out and can be analyzed as a PCAP file in open source tools like Wireshark, which many of you might be familiar with. And with Wireshark, you can already go in there and see, okay, I can see for this particular case that we're looking at right here, a PDF was sent, right? Now in most cases for a security team, at this point, you're kind of, okay, I want to see what was in that PDF. I'm not sure if, let's just think about it as a data loss situation. Was that PDF something that they should have sent or shouldn't have sent? What's going on here? Why did this flag up? So at that point, you can go in and you can actually go in and extract, you can recreate that and recreate the PDF file. So there's a number of steps here. For those who are well known in these tools, it's not a big deal. They can do it. But what the Pinpoint solution for Credocom has done is actually just automate all that. You just press a button and you get a PDF file up, and you can have a look at it and say, okay, that's not okay, move along. So it might be seconds, it might be minutes that we're talking about here, but if you're looking at 17,000 events during the week, it makes a difference. And this is just some of the things that you can do, right? This is just some of the ideas. The real key here is you have the data. You have the facts. You have the packet data. Once you have that, you can build all sorts of tools on top of it to extract that information and do whatever you want with it. And that's the key thing that we've got to look at. So just to round out, basically, network packet capture is what you need if you want to have the hard facts. It doesn't solve everything, but what it does, it at least helps your security team to be faster, to resolve things quicker. It complements all the other things that you're doing with CM, with the entire system that you're putting together, the security incident response systems, etc. So it's an excellent addition to what you're trying to do. You can do anomaly detection based on packet capture. So it's actually essential for that. So now, if you accept the fact that threats are going to happen, I'm not going to be able to catch everything with my perimeter defenses. I need to actually see what's happening in the network. this is data that's invaluable for actually seeing what's actually happening in the network. Integrated access to packet capture details enables faster incident response and resolution. When it comes to GDPR, this is essential. So it really is the time right now to start seriously considering these things. And I think the case can be made to management for investment in these type of solutions, because it's going to get very costly very quickly. So access to the hard facts enables faster notification and compliance with GDPR and minimization of cost of data breach. And that's really what it comes down to in the end of the day. Faster response, minimization of costs, regulatory compliance.